I wake up and I can hear them all talking in the guest house. I go upstairs, firmly convinced I'm going home, and they stuck their hand out and said, "Welcome to Excel." He stopped in the middle of a recording session one night, and he looked at me and he said, "David, you realize if this album fails, they're going to blame you and they're going to blame me." MTV was playing the hell out of Generation Clash, which I thought was a huge mistake as a single. The world was my oyster, dude. I'm not going to lie. I mean, I had girls everywhere, and that was not allowed with Accept. That's not the kind of band it is. One of the members had called my girlfriend and had witnessed something I had done. I asked him if he did it. He looked at me and said, "Yeah, of course I did." So I slapped him. And the next thing you know, I'm standing on the street in the middle of Chicago. You know, I didn't have a dime in my pocket, but I'm staying at Stevie Nicks' house, and I'm working with Madonna's monitor guy in a guest house recording demos. Really strong following and had great songs. We had the connection to Stevie Nicks and her management. All the ducks had fallen into a row. Next thing you know, we're signed to Warner Bros. Because we were looking for, that hit song.
Yep.
And it can't hurt to have a Bon Jovi song on your record. We had a #1 single, Loaded Gun, on the radio, 114 or so stations playing it all day. But it just died. And probably within a month's time, they called me in the office and said, "It's over, we're dropping you."
How much longer can David Reece rock?
It is no longer a rumor. It is official. I am halfway done with the new Bangalore Choir. Very reminiscent of On Target.
The hair metal guru from Warren to Crew. The hair metal guru. Never forget Charlie too.
Man, I'm so pumped to sit down today with a true powerhouse of rock and metal, David Reece. Fans of this channel know David from his tenure as the frontman of Accept during the iconic and my favorite Accept album, the Eat the Heat era. But his journey didn't stop there. He went on to form Bangalore Choir, who released one of the great albums of the era with 1992's On Target. And he has performed on an astronomical amount of albums with various bands and solo projects since then. And rumor has it is currently working on a new Bangalore Choir album. David Reece, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. Greetings, Anthony. And it is no longer a rumor. It is official. I am halfway done with the new Bangalore Choir. Very reminiscent of On Target.
Awesome.
I'll give you a little rundown why.
Sure.
As
please.
a solo artist, in all honesty, touring Europe and the States, which I did this time last year, the David Reece name is known, but brands are known better.
Sure.
NCC Dokken, NCC, Piercy DiMartini. They want to hear the classics, but the branding is what it's all about. So my manager, Valentin Labani, who I just signed up with last year in France, we had great success on Baptized by Fire. It was #1 in Germany for weeks, and I did really well with it, but the name was well known, a lot of curiosity. Yes. But they wanted to hear, just one night, all or nothing, slipping away, and some of Eat the Heat. So yes. I performed a lot of that in the set. And I came home from that tour early December, and I started thinking, you know what? Revive the name.
Yeah.
Fresh meat in the band, fresh guitar players, different producer, who is Mario Percadani from Hardline fame.
Ah, yes.
He's playing guitar on it, and Andy Susamil, I've reconnected with him. He's playing guitar as well. And I've actually written a song with Freddie Durnberg from Axel Rudy Pell on this record.
Okay.
The keyboard player.
Sure.
Fabulous song. And I've just went back to On Target, and to try to recreate something from 1992 is not an easy task. No. I'm not copying it, but I'm trying to follow that. And it's been a joy, man. I mean, I got a lot of record company interest in it, and a lot of shows coming up at the end of this year in Europe. And going to do an Alcatraz Girls' School triple band tour with Bangalore.
Oh, no way.
November and December. Yeah. So that's all coming together. That comes out. That starts the 25th of November.
Okay.
12 shows, and then before that, I'm in France, Belgium, and Holland with Bangalore as well. So, and then next year the onslaught begins. The festivals, we're confirming those.
Sure.
About once a week we're getting, you know.
Sure. That's awesome, and thanks for that update. And you're right. You know, like Axl Rose isn't gonna do the numbers that Guns N' Roses does, and Bangalore Choir is so recognizable. You know,
Yeah.
even so I'm glad to
You
hear that.
know,
I'm sure fans are glad to hear
a
that.
the crazy thing about Bangalore Choir is that we broke up, of course, after we were dropped and everything
Yep.
happened with the Do Nimrud. I played Firefest and I had to have three original members. Sadly, one of the originals that played that night in Firefest has passed in the last few months. But I was told the world was dead for, you know, melodic rock.
Sure.
And I did not know that the UK and Europe had just absorbed in '93 on Target. And I don't know how many people say I've waited 19 years to see this band and
Yep.
where have you been? And my plan was, if I'd have known better, I would have put the band on an airplane and we would have gypsied it and played the Cart and Horses or whatever
Sure.
in the UK and just slogged around and kept going. But we were
Yep.
told it was dead.
Yep.
So there is a brand which is important, and the classics you have to play, Angel in Black.
Yep.
So then I sat down with pen and paper and said, okay. And my first attempt was futile. I was writing heavy stuff again because I kind of went through a Chris Cornell phase
Yeah.
for a while because my wife and my kids here just that's all they listen to. So that kind of wore on me. But now I've kind of figured it out and found the chemistry, and it's working really well.
That's awesome. And I want to I want to get into the plans of and whether or not America is going to see anything about that. But I'm wondering if we can go back because we were talking before I hit record. I'm in Fargo, North Dakota, and you were I think born in Oklahoma but ended up in Minnesota. You've done time in Montana. So can we go
Yeah.
back to like when you first started figuring out that hey, music was your thing? And first getting into bands, can you kind of describe that period of your life for a little bit?
My grandmother's side from Oklahoma were all bluegrass country players.
Yep.
Her brother, her father. I have vivid memories on the farm of those guys would be in the field all day. After they'd come in, they'd sit down and start picking. And sitting on my uncle Mac's lap, and just the smell of him and the smell of that acoustic guitar, and then just doing that to kind of turn the day off. And it was funny because they were so poor that at the end of the jam session, they'd all walk down the dirt road to the local beer joint, buy one beer each, walk back to the house, go to bed, get up, and go out in the field the next day. And we'd make homemade ice cream, and you know the whole thing.
Yep.
We were country, and my grandmother played Charlie Pride records, Buck Owens, uh, you know, all that stuff, Loretta Lynn, all day long on the big television combo turntable things we used to have. Where that was it. She would carry me around and sing to me all day. So country music was all a big part of my start. Conway Twitty. Getting into the musical thing, my dad was a chemist at Phillips Petroleum. And in 1968, there was a giant layoff in Oklahoma because that's a lot of gas and oil there. So he went hunting for work. He ended up at 3M in Minnesota.
Okay.
We moved up there in '69. Bunch of Okies. We ain't never seen snow like that in our life. Cold. And we got there in September, and I mean, I think it was a record winter where you couldn't even get out of the house. You know what that's like where you're living.
Yep.
And I joined the boys' choir in my elementary school, and my first real choir teacher, her name was Mrs. Harnick. And I was at that time a high tenor, low soprano because my voice hadn't changed. And I just naturally sang on key, so I was put kind of first chair. Then one day she said to me, let's do a show for the school. And I was in fifth grade. She played classical guitar, and I sang Yesterday, McCartney. And that feeling from 250 kids at a little local school was magic. I was hooked. So then I kind of evolved into Deep Purple. I bought Machine Head and I bought Schools Out the same day on vinyl. That was like 71, 72.
Sure.
And then I left home at a very early age at about 15 years old and moved into a house or an apartment with a bunch of our friends that, we all had family issues in those days. And we just had a little commune of kids. And one of them was a guitar player. And I was working in a factory, double shifts. And in those days, minimum wage was like $2 an hour.
Yep.
And I was killing myself to live. And I'd come home after sweating all day and into the night, and he'd be on the couch with chicks and a Stratocaster and playing in clubs. And I hated him. But I said, man, I'd like to be doing what he's doing. But one day I was in the shower and we used to have the old AM radio put on the soap dish and the battery, right? And I was singing Communication Breakdown, Zeppelin.
Yep.
And the curtain flies open and he said, dude, you can sing. You want to join my band? And I'm like, sure. So we went and did a gig, and it was a beer kegger party, the old days. And we only knew 4 songs, so we played them over and over and over. We just jammed them too, and it was just magic. That was like 76, maybe 77, something like that.
Is this in Minneapolis or what part of Minnesota?
Yeah.
Okay. Yep.
Minnesota. That's the Twin Cities.
Yep.
I was living kind of outside of North St. Paul.
Yep.
And I began to start playing the clubs and getting known by a lot of guys doing the cover thing where in those days, which you've heard this story many times, it was 5 sets a night, 7 days a week.
Yeah.
And we played, honestly, those days, you could play 350 days a year. Every year. It was magic.
Yep.
Because the British invasion was starting to happen again with metal and British Steel came out and all those great albums. So I kind of built my name up in a band called Dare Force. Started coming to my gigs on their nights off. And they had the original singer from Cheap Trick. His name is Zeno.
Okay.
And he was their singer. And they weren't happy with him. And they heard about me. So they come and watch me. And then one night we went to one of those all-night parties. And, they were talking. And they snuck me into a rehearsal when he was out food shopping one day. We were jamming in the kitchen in an old band house.
Yep.
They said, this is great. We've got to figure out how to get rid of him. I was in another band. I'm in another party house with a bunch of other musicians. Phone rings on a Sunday. We just fired Zeno. We need you to play tonight. And I'm like, here we go again. I know 4 songs.
Right.
And we played a club that was called Duffy's, which later turned into Norma Jeans. Yeah. And right next door was a club called Mr. Nibs. So that south side of Minneapolis was booming, as well as St. Paul. So I'm in the band after that. We're doing 7 days a week. Like I said, 350, 360 shows a year.
Yeah.
I went from, 4 nights a week to 7 nights a week. And that's where the journey really began.
Okay.
For me. And, doing all the covers we were kind of different. We would do some instrumental stuff. I would take a break. They would do Jeff Beck, Blue Wind, and some Wishbone Ash songs, stuff like that. We did a lot of Zeppelin, Purple. Thin Lizzy was big with us because it was a double guitar.
Yep.
Aerosmith. And I started to cut my teeth in the rock scene, that way.
Minneapolis is always kind of been known for like the kind of the punk sound, Husker Du, The Replacements, Soul Asylum. So what was the scene like then? And what did you have interactions with those bands?
Yeah, we had interactions with Des Dickerson from Prince, who was the original guitar player. Yep. We knew him. And being in Minneapolis, the problem with that genre and that time period was everybody thought it was going to come to us because Minneapolis had boomed so quickly with Prince, Husker Du, God, I could name, Greg Kinn style groups all over the place. And we were like a really big fish in a small pond. But you could literally play, like if you had a 1 set or 90-minute set show on a night, you could walk down the street and there'd be a club full on a Monday night. It was complete chaos. I miss those days. I hated it at the time because after 2 years of grinding, you want to go home.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, because you play like the same loop, the 5-state region, your state included, Pomp Room in South Dakota, and then you go into Chicago and Wisconsin, and then you go up to Canada and traipse across Highway 1 back and forth, and then repeat, rinse,
Sure.
repeat. And, you become, their great grandchildren, the owners of these clubs,
Yep.
in the middle of, the boundary waters of Minnesota, but you dread it, but that's what you do.
Yeah.
And it was unbelievable. I mean, you could cross the river into St. Paul, and every club Monday through Sunday would be packed as well. I
Yep.
mean, it was a lot of energy, man. Those days are gone.
Yep. Unfortunately.
So,
was there were you writing at the time? When did the thought come like, hey, I want to get out of this cover thing. I want to write songs. I want a band that has a legitimate shot.
we did. Brian Bart, one of the guitar players, had left the band, and we gotten chosen as best band of the Twin Cities, and we were the #1 played song on pirate radio with a song called "On My Way," which I didn't sing, but that was our, encore goodnight song.
Sure.
And they did a big show at the Metropolitan Sports Stadium, which is now where the North Stars used to play. It's gone now.
Yep.
And we headlined it, and it was like 15,000 people, sold out. And I remember we had invited some people that had worked for Led Zeppelin and all these people. And I was in the dressing room and trying on Dino Cicerelli's jersey, using his razor, this is cool. I'm here. And I remember like yesterday, the stage manager came to our door, opened it up, wearing his laminate, said, "Stage call, let's go." And I stood up and said, "How many people are here?" And he goes, "Sold out. It's about 15,000." And I felt my legs start to wobble. Because I played, 500 people, 600, maybe 1,000, but nothing like that. Yeah. And it was unbelievable. They had literally put plywood on the ice rink for the North Stars. People were standing on, like, 5/8 inch plywood to cover the ice for the games. Right. I remember it being ice cold in there, but the people went bonkers. And writing wise, I wrote a song that was called "Half the Man" and "Subway Kid" with John O'Neill, the other guitarist that we played in the set, and he had written some songs. But we were kids. We didn't know anything about songwriting. The thing that we should have done, right, is pack the bags and move to Beverly. Because we had the momentum, we had the great band, we could have slaughtered the strip, yep, and found the right producer to help us write and have a hit record. Because that was like 1980, 81, yep, when it was really, really exploding.
Did you guys record anything? Was there?
Yeah, we did, but I mean, it was all 4-track in those days on a cassette with a Fostex little kick button that you turned it on. Sure. The band was in dire need of a real professional manager, and the same old story. Get a real producer. Let's cut through the meat and write hit songs. We could have done it. I really think that band it was one of the best live bands I ever played with. It was just a magic of that group.
So I think if I understand right, did you move when that didn't happen? Did you move to LA after that? Or what happens after Dare Force that eventually leads you to Accept?
Well, crazy story. I got pissed off and said, "I've had enough of this. I'm going to LA." Well, there's everybody who meets a singer or a waiter, that's trying to make it in LA, and I was homeless. I didn't know anybody. I was literally breaking into cars. I'd walk down the streets and find doors that were open, crawl in the back seat, sleep in the back seat, and get woken up by some screaming maniac, "Who are you?" and then run down the street and spend the day in West Hollywood trying to meet people, crashing on people's couches. And nothing really happened on the first attempt. And then I went back to Minnesota, and Dare Force said, "Come back." So then we did that for about a year, and I developed a raging cocaine problem. That was when everybody was on the marching powder. It was like coffee, so I got fired. So, and then I said, screw it. But when I went back the second time, I brought an English guy that I had met to play guitar in the band. So him and I went back to Minnesota, same routine, 7 nights a week. And then that just kind of fizzled out. So I went back to LA and said, I'm going to do it this time. And I met Mitch Perry, the guitar player from Tallis, who had done Billy Sheehan's stuff in the beginning. And Mitch had a studio guy, and we went in and cut 5 songs. Shopped them to everybody. Everybody said no. I was staying at a woman's house named Lucy Forbes, and she had this weird little thing called Rock Congress. It was kind of a rock placement agency. Because I was homeless, I needed a place to sleep, so I slept on the floor next to this old propane fake fireplace. And in Santa Monica on the beach, it's cold at night. So, I'm sleeping on a pile of clothes. She's trying to get me noticed, blah, blah, blah. Nothing's really happening. I get completely fed up with Los Angeles. Told her one day, I'm leaving, and my parents had moved to Colorado. So I jumped to Greyhound, went there, got a construction job on the Air Force Academy, actually. And been there about 2 months, and the phone rang, and it was Wolf Hoffman from Accept. Okay. And when the phone rings at 10 o'clock at night, and it's the guitar player of Accept, it might as well be Mickey Mouse. You know what I mean? I mean, it's like, I hung up on him because I thought it was a prank call. And he called right back and said, I think we have a bad connection. I'm Wolf Hoffman. I've got your 5-song demo here that you did in California. And I'm like, what? And what had happened was, 3 days after I had gone to Colorado, this woman knew Dieter Dierks, the producer of the Scorpions. Yep. And he had gone to LA to do Scorpion business and find an Accept singer because he was going to produce the album. And they had a guy named Rob Armitage, an English guy, and it wasn't working out. And he said, man, I have to find a singer. Do you know anybody? She goes, this guy. And she handed my cassette to Dieter. And he put it in and said, that's the guy. Call him. She goes, I don't know where he is. He went to Colorado. So the story I was told was they went through the phone book looking at all the Jack Reeses or David Reeses in the Colorado Springs area and found Jack and Janet Reece and called that number with my parents. And they gave that number, my number, to Wolf, and he called me. Okay. You know how this life is. It's one here today, gone later day. It's a bizarre life. So the next thing you know, I'm I used to play Restless and Wild. I played balls a few times. I did Fast as a Shark and some other side bands, the heavier bands. And I knew who they were, but I wasn't honestly a big fan. Yeah. I can't say I was. But I always thought Udo was some type of freak. Who is this guy? This guy's a nutcase. Who is this little screamer? Right. So the next thing you know, I'm on an airplane to Dusseldorf, Germany. And I literally landed at 7 at night. Funny story was going to Denver Stapleton. My dad called me and said, your flight's early in the morning. There's a snowstorm coming in. They're going to shut down the freeway. We got to go now. So, okay. So we jump in the truck. He blazes a trail through the blizzard to the hotel across from Stapleton. And he turns around and goes home and says, good luck. And I get up in the morning. You know how it is. Doing international flights, you fly all day. So I land, meet the band. It's all very surreal to me. They take me to this guest house that Dieter owns in the village called Poolheim. And they say, see you tomorrow. Get some rest. Well, you got jet lag. You know what that's like. You're a soldier. Yeah. You can't sleep. I'm excited. Horrible. So after, it's horrible. So I'm 26, 27 maybe. And so I decide in my conventional wisdom that I'm going to go for a walk and walk off this lag. So I go out walking around this rainy, dark German village, you know how the streets are named, Strasse this, Strasse that. And I got lost. So I'm panicking with this long, the European style keys are. They're very long and kind of ancient looking. And I'm going up to these houses that look familiar and putting the key in, it doesn't work. I'm like, I'm fucked, man. I'm going to sleep outside now. It's raining, typical German night. Finally, I see this house. I go, that looks familiar. I put the key in, it opens the door. Oh, I found it. I go down into the basement, jump in the bed, just fell asleep. Daylight was coming. Probably 8 o'clock in the morning, somebody's beating on my door. I'm like, what is going on? So I open the door and it's Peter, the bass player, with a bass on his back saying, let's go to the studio. Let's go. I'm like, cool. I get to meet the Scorpions.
Right.
Yeah, because I knew they were telling me in the car that Scorps were doing Savage Amusement and that they were ending the relationship with Dieter. And my young, fanboy thing is, oh, I get to meet bankers and clouds. And I walk into the studio, this massive place, and there's Dieter and Rudolph Schenker kind of having an argument. And I run up, hey man, blah, 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 blah. And they just looked at me like I was from Mars, like, get away from me. And Peter honestly took me directly into the basement, into a tiny recording studio with a 24 track machine, 2-inch tape, a 58 mic, sat at the soundboard, played the song, and said, sing something. What? So he goes, I kind of have this as a title, just do something. Yeah. Okay. So we did it all day. And at night, the band would come in and listen to what I'd done and give their opinion.
Right.
This goes on for 3 weeks, maybe longer.
Could I
seeing everybody?
Is this a tryout, or was it like you are in? Okay, they're kind of just feeling you out.
I'm getting felt out. How am I to live with? How much do I drink? What kind of physical shape am I in?
Yep.
Can my voice work? Dieter's listening to the tapes at night as well. I'm still there, but day to day, I didn't know if I was going to get sent home.
Okay.
And then we go into like this pre-production kind of thing with the whole band in a room with Dieter, and I'm singing what I've written to what they're playing, and he's conducting, and I'm clueless. I've never done this. This is a real band,
Right.
And then it gets progressively weirder to where, making a change from Udo to a new guy is a huge step, right? So they're getting all the label pressure. Balls did like 500,000 units close, but didn't really break the stage. They said, we need to break this band or just end it. So we need an English-speaking guy. We can do a little more commercialized. Then I think we can break the band. That was mistake number one, in my opinion. But so the final audition is in a live. We went to this rehearsal space in Cologne called the Empire Club. It's like I used to work out there, and they had these rehearsal rooms. I knew the owner, and the band said, "Okay, we're going to go rehearse there." And when you rehearse with Accept, it's not 2 or 3 hours. It's an 8 to 10 hour day. I mean, they are, and I credit them for the dedication and what it's like to be in a band, knowing what it takes.
Yep.
It's practice, practice, practice. So we're doing these rehearsals, and then they say, "Oh, we're going to play a live show on March so and so," and I go, "So that's the final audition, right? How is he going to handle the crowd?" And the night of the show, I remember I'm nervous as a long-tailed cat, right? And we go to a restaurant across the street from the club, and there's a queue of kids, down the street, because on the billboard it says Germany's #1 metal band. And everybody had heard they got a new singer. So the kids knew that was me.
Yeah.
And Bruce Dickinson shows up at the dinner.
Right. Wow.
Wearing his Bon Olympic fencing running suit he had just left because he's the captain, and the manager invited him down for his opinion. He walks in, "Hi, Mike. Hey, guys, how you doing, lads?" They all know each other because they had toured together. And I said, "I'm fucked. I'm done."
Right.
So the gig goes off with about 2,000 kids. They're going mental, and my manager says, "Go back with your little girlfriend you found and enjoy the night, and we'll talk to you tomorrow." I said, "They're going to send me home. I'm going to go get drunk and have a good time." That was a great experience. I wake up and I can hear them all talking in the guest house. I go upstairs. firmly convinced I'm going home, and they stuck their hand out and said, "Welcome to Excel."
Wow.
That's the story.
Wow. So
The Germans are very careful about what they decide to do. It's a very linear way of doing things. I respect the hell out of the German metal scene, but they do not make compulsive decisions. It's well thought out.
right. So once you get accepted into the band, then you go in to record Eat the Heat. And
Mm.
what was that recording process like? Was it comfortable or was it like
No.
I'm sure it was high stress, right?
Yeah, I mean, Dieter and I, we bonded pretty well. The way they record was they do all the drums first, and then they would do the bass, but you're not allowed in there. And then Wolf would do rhythm guitars, and then he does all the guitars on all the records. So if
Yep.
you ever see a second guitarist, except it's nobody but him. And then we start doing the vocals. So I had the tendency to sing in the backbeat because I'm an American guy, and everything in German is kind of on top of the beat. So there was friction there.
Sure.
And we literally would start the vocals at 1 in the afternoon, then take a dinner break and finish at 1 a.m. the next morning. It was 12-hour days.
Right.
And some of those songs, like Mistreated, have over 50 tracks. I mean, in the production. In those days, things, they were over the top, layers and
Yep.
layers. But I can tell you one of the most poignant, um, ego deflating moments of my life while we were recording the album. We're probably half done. Dieter's working with me, and I don't know anything. But in the beginning of the record, he said to me, "You have a great voice, but you don't know what it is, and it's my job to find that what it is."
Mm.
Because I've been doing cover songs, I'm emulating all these guys to get paid in cover bands, right? You got to do that to get paid. You got to sound like Whitesnake, or you got to sound like Priest. So I didn't really have an identity in my voice, and he brought that.
Yep.
But the hardest thing for him to say, which was absolutely undeniably true, he stopped in the middle of a recording session one night and he looked at me and he said, "David, you realize if this album fails, they're going to blame you and they're going to blame me. It's our fault." And I said, "Oh, that will never happen. I'm David Reece." He goes, "This is the music business. This is a big deal right now, what we're doing." But he was absolutely correct.
Right.
Absolutely the most true, no, none truer words than I've ever heard. You probably had those moments in your life where somebody said something to you. Your first is defense, and then you're like, "Wait a minute, now it all makes sense."
Yeah. Yep.
So
Did you feel like did the band accept like did you feel like hey we're a brother or brotherhood or did it feel like a business
no,
obligation?
it was all business, and the thing about Accept was that inside the band there was a lot of personal friction, and I'm the new guy, so I'm palling around with this guy, and he's telling me that guy's a dick. We're a team, you and me. And then 2 days later, he's a team with that guy. I'm the dick. That goes on a lot in bands, and that was really hard to deal with.
Right.
And they've been together since Udo formed the band in 1975. I
Right.
mean, so there's a long history of somehow that dysfunction
Yep.
worked for them.
Yep.
But it was very, very stressful. You didn't know some days, even after the record was going great and the mixes, I still didn't think I was part of the band.
Right.
It's Wolf fan,
Right.
and that's obvious by what you see these days. It's only Wolf.
Yep.
But I did. Go ahead.
Well, I was just gonna say and Udo, this short little kind of ugly guy was almost like the band mascot. So to have to replace this guy, I mean, he was one of the most recognizable people just because of his original look for that time frame.
To this day, it's the same. And Udo and I, while I'm doing Eat the Heat, he's next door recording Mean Machine. That's where I met Andy Susamil. And we would go to the pub with Udo and Andy and Matthias Deek and all those guys and Raise Hell. And they were more of a family to me than Accept.
Really?
And they would always say, and Udo would say, "You will see, you will see." And I'd be like, "Yeah, we've been friends since '87. I did the UDO Steel Factory tour. I was a special guest on that a couple years ago.
That's right.
But the thing about Udo, and I think nothing but great things of him. The thing about Udo is, I asked my manager one day, "What is it about this guy?" You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's just his look and all this stuff. And she looked me in the eyes and she said, "David, the reason he's so famous is because he's one of them.
Right.
He's like your typical factory worker guy who drinks the beers afterward that they can feel comfortable with. You, David, have really long, pretty blonde hair. You're an American. You got the chicks. Udo is one of them." And one thing about the European audience, when they believe in a band, they will die with the band.
Right.
If you break that nucleus, they take it personal. They will live and die by your worst records and your best records.
Sure.
So it was a very controversial thing for them to do to the fan base. You know, Udo came out and was doing better than us. I mean, he went right on tour and everybody was familiar with him.
Yep.
He stayed kind of, I mean, Animal House was written by Accept. That was supposed to be the next Accept album. So they just gave it to him as part of the "you're fired" kind of agreement, you know, which I wish I would have done Animal House. That would have been the perfect Accept album for me to step into.
Sure.
But
Sure.
yeah, it was never ever a nucleus where I was a guy that was in the band. In America, that was our first tour with Wasp and Metal Church, and you know, 50% of the fans hated my guts, and 50% absolutely loved me. There was no middle.
Right. So you go on that tour, you said, with Metal Church and Wasp, and you know, and even Wasp, those that was starting to be where they were starting to, you know, get a little bit smaller. I can't remember what album they were on, but you know,
Headless Children.
they weren't blowing up at that time either. So the tour is
Dude,
not doing well.
we started off at you know, like fairground shows inside rodeo halls in Texas, and you know, the Sunken Gardens in San Antonio. I mean, pretty big shows.
Yep.
And like into the third week of the tour, we're playing 300-seat clubs, and they're using road cases to build the stage bigger so I can stand on road cases. The promoters were selling off the tour because it wasn't selling.
Right.
And I mean, even though, you know, MTV was playing the hell out of Generation Clash, which I thought was a huge mistake as a single. Being a heavy band like that, we should have released Ecstasy or D-Train as the first single.
Sure.
And then kind of got people used to me, and then brought out the weird song Generation Clash. So it was just so different that people were like, nah. But that tour did not sell well at all. It started off really, really good, and then it slowly trickled down into, I mean, we played some gay bars in Boston, you know, I mean, it was just, I mean, small places. So, you know, an arena band like them realizing, hey, this failed. Udo's doing festivals in Europe, he's kicking ass, and we're playing to 300 people with, you know, fairly well-known band called Metal Church starting the show, us second, and then Wasp headlining. You know, it was, every band was feeling it. You know, we were all kind of dying off.
Yep. So did you feel like, was there animosity from the other guys and accept like, fuck, this is your fault, or was it like, man, you know, or how do you
I
describe
was just,
that?
you know, there's cultural differences. You being a military person, you've probably lived in places where, you know, you hang with your people, and you know, you try to blend in with the others, and it's just, there's different ways of thinking, acting, humor, what you believe in. You know, yeah, it was all of that cocktail of weirdness that, you know, I got nothing but respect for that band. That without that record, you wouldn't be talking to me right now.
Sure.
That opened the door.
Yep. So that, and I don't know how much you want to get into this, but I know like you guys play Chicago. You and bass player Peter Baltus apparently getting to. Can you just briefly, because that is the end of the band for you, right?
Yeah, things had gotten really ugly up right before then. And I put down a label of Jack Daniels before the gig, playing at the Avon, and went on stage. Really don't remember the gig. Sang well, apparently. And after the show, there were some girlfriends in the band talking to each other, and I was, this kid on a tour bus, and the world was my oyster, dude. I'm not gonna lie. I mean, I had girls everywhere, and that was not allowed with Accept. That's not the kind of band it is. You don't bring chicks on the bus. You don't bang girls, and you don't party, and I was bending the rules because that's who I was. And he had called, one of the members had called my girlfriend and had witnessed something I'd done. I asked him if he did it. He looked at me and said, "Yeah, of course I did." So I slapped him. Right. And the next thing you know, I'm standing on the street in the middle of Chicago with nowhere to go. And thank God the bus driver was nice enough to give me money for a hotel room. And the next day, I'm back in Colorado sleeping on my dad's couch. And he had met the band literally 2-3 weeks before that and going like, "Wow, my kid made it." And now I'm out.
So how long had that tour been going by the time it ended? Was it really?
Well, I've been in the band for probably 2 years. That tour has gone for, I think, the first tour we did in the States was as a headliner in clubs because I knew all the bookers.
Yep.
And the manager asked me, "Do you have an agent we can call? We should go out and do a warm-up tour." So we played like 35 shows. Then we went back to Europe, and then we got offered the Watch tour. Yep. So we had already done, I don't know, between living there and everything, about 2.5 years of being around each other, 2 years. But that Wasp tour was maybe 20 shows before I was thrown under the bus. Sure. I mean, I regret slapping him, but I was a young, dumb kid, and it was the wrong thing to do. Peter and I are friends now. Yeah. Water under the bridge. I mean, I know bands that have literally tried to murder each other. I've seen knives come out. I mean, I've seen things in backstages that, people don't, for some reason, that story is notorious. It's all about the blame thing. Sure. I destroyed the band. And that story comes up every interview I do. But it's really not that big of a deal. Sure. And I think the older that we've gotten, we've all kind of realized how ridiculous it was.
Right.
You know what? And I'll say this as honest as I can. I didn't hire myself. They hired me. And I've lived with them for quite some time before they made that choice. So the blame's on both sides.
Sure. So we get to the end of Accept, and even though it ended badly, like now you've got a name. What was the process like? Was there an immediate? Was there people reaching out to get you to form? What was the period that led up to forming Bangalore Choir like?
I knew a drummer in Minneapolis who had run into some drug problems and was fired from a band that had gotten signed to Atlantic. He saw that I was back in Minneapolis. I went back to Minneapolis and thought, well, find some guys. I'm going to go to LA. He came up to me and said, "Let's go to LA." And I had the name then. People knew me. Finally, I'm not the guy that's standing in a corner with my hair out to here and spandex on. People, "Oh, that's the guy from Accept."
Right. So
I was looking for a name, players. That drummer that I went with didn't work out. We rehearsed. I found Kurt Mitchell through John Kirk, the other guitarist.
Yep.
And blew my mind with his talent. And Danny Greenberg on bass, who just died from cancer a few months ago, sadly. But we rehearsed every day. We flyered that city. Everybody knew who we were. And the guy that brought me out there was connected to Stevie Nicks because the manager of the other band was her assistant. So immediately I'm thrown into, the life of the rich and famous style. I didn't have a dime in my pocket, but I'm staying at Stevie Nicks' house and I'm working with Madonna's monitor guy in a guest house recording demos. And, it just went from down here to up here overnight.
Yep.
And we literally were offered, I remember going to see Michael Schenker because I knew the Schenker guys then, and Herman the drummer had called me and said, "Hey, we're going to see Michael play at the Palace. Come join us." And I said, "Sure." So I tell the band, "Hey, Herman's on the phone." And they're going, "From the Scorpions?" I go, "Yeah, I know him." But they're like, "Oh my God." So we get the fire escape entrance and go up on the balcony, and we're watching Mike play, and Rudy's there, and Matthias is there, and Klaus. And I walked out of the venue, and I remember seeing a guy from Giant Warner Brothers. And he said, "Hey, man, word on the streets is you're about to sign." I said, "Yeah, you should get in line." He said, "Be in my office at 9 a.m. tomorrow morning." And at that time, I had been offered a deal by every label in California. And we only had played 9 shows.
Was
Now,
this 1990?
yeah, when you say 9 shows in Hollywood, that's about 9 months because you don't play every weekend.
Right.
But we had played, Orange County, we played Hollywood, and we built a really strong following and had great songs. We had the connection to Stevie Nicks and her management. All the ducks had fallen into a row. Next thing you know, we're signed to Warner Brothers.
Yep.
So then we go in the studio and make On Target.
And Max Norman produces. There are songs written by John Bon Jovi and Aldo Nova. I'd love to hear how that connection happened.
Another crazy rock story. A&M Records, John was doing Blaze of Glory, Young Guns soundtrack.
Yep.
My manager that worked with Stevie said he knew John, and said Aldo Nova and John are down at the studio. They've got some songs that, they're willing to let you take a look at it because we were looking for, that hit song.
Yep.
And it can't hurt to have a Bon Jovi song on your record.
No.
So I go down to A&M Studios in Hollywood, walk in. John's there with his eyes, they're black. He's been working nonstop. I think Eric Clapton Jeff Beck was there working on a track. It was surreal. And I take a 10-minute break. John, I didn't know Bon Jovi was a cigarette smoker. He's puffing away on Camels, and Aldo's sitting there, and he's trying to get Aldo's career back on track. And they played Doing the Dance for me, and I said, "That's a cool song, and I'll try it." And that's how that ended up on the record. Because we thought, having the connection to Bon Jovi would elevate the status. Didn't do shit.
Right.
It doesn't hurt, right?
Right. So that you record with Max Norman and you've got all the momentum. I mean, it appears, but the album comes out in 1992, and I've called it the curse of 92. There were so many great albums that were put out that year, but in September of 91, Nirvana's Smells Like Teen Spirit comes out, and
it was
immediate.
I went to see Soundgarden at the Palace, and I think Bad Motorfinger was their first record.
Yeah. Or the first one on a major label. Yep.
Yeah, the first, dun, 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 dun.
Yep.
And I remember seeing the band on stage, and my jaw was down. I was like, "What the fuck is this?
Right.
This is Black Sabbath on steroids with this guy who sings like God and looks like Jesus Christ."
Yeah.
And I knew something was happening. I could feel it. I didn't know how bad it was happening. And the album comes out the same day as Smells Like Teen Spirit.
Okay.
We shipped, I think we shipped about 300,000 copies. They shipped 600. So they were certified platinum, I think, that week. We had returns of about 100,000 that week. Right. Then the next week, we had a #1 single, Loaded Gun, on the radio, 114 or so stations playing it all day. But it just died. And probably within a month's time, they called me in the office and said, "It's over, we're dropping you." And was told, "Get a day job." That goes back to the story about Europe. Had I known that grunge hadn't even touched the shores here, I would have come here. And the band, God knows what we could have done, But that was pretty disheartening.
Did you tour that album at all in America? Did you tour that? Did you tour On Target?
Yeah. I actually played Fargo sold out show. I can't remember the name of the place. It was a big place. We played there. We played all over the United States. We toured with Lynch Mob.
Okay.
We did a bunch of dates. You know, right before the release, we did a ton of stuff.
Sure.
West Coast, Mexico. And then we were offered, actually the hard part of the story is that my manager, Howard Kaufman, managed David Coverdale, and he wanted us to be the opening act on the Slip of the Tongue tour.
Yep.
Which was like, oh my God, 40 cities worldwide. This is it. We're
Right.
gonna break. And it went from that conversation to no conversation. And one day I asked him, I go, what's going on? Are we doing the tour? Well, Dave's not comfortable with you opening. And I found out later that Coverdale was starting to have vocal issues.
Yeah.
And he was put off that I could still do what he used to do. And my manager said, well, that's a great compliment. We'll get you another tour. But in the interim, you know, the Seattle sound was really exploding.
Right.
So it was a combination of bad timing, the cultural shift. I mean, it's kind of like, you know, when the Beatles came, Elvis was king, and then he was a house servant. He went to doing residencies in Vegas. I mean, no disrespect to Elvis, but they changed
Yep.
the whole movement of rock and roll.
Right.
Rightfully so.
Sure.
I mean, I think, you know, what happened with hair metal bands, if that's the word, you know, every lead singer had bleached his hair blonde. Everybody was wearing Spanish. We kind of had overdone the big power ballads to death.
Yep.
And, you know, 99% of the people can't relate to a guy who's got chicks and cool cars and a big house when you've got this little city called Seattle that's raining all the time and there's people going through serious personal issues that they touched a nerve with the young public.
Yeah.
Hey, I feel just like that guy.
Yeah.
And say what you want, Kurt Cobain was a genius songwriter. I mean, I'm actually growing to love his music now, whereas I hated his guts because it was an ego thing in the beginning. But a lot of those bands really were great.
Sure.
Alice in Chains.
I think most of us, like, I was a freshman in college when that was happening. But what we didn't understand was we thought that those grunge bands coming in, we thought they could coincide. You know, oh, it's another form of metal, just like there's punk. But when it became, you had to pick. You know, if you had to pick, like, you could not like grunge and like the genre that you were a part of, and that's where the big divide came.
True story. I was at a pool party with Janie Lane. He was unrecognizable in those days. God bless him. Standing next to me in the kitchen, we're all partying and drinking tequila, and Piercy was there, and every one of us had been dropped. And we're all standing there with our thumb up our ass going, what are we going to do now? So what do? We try to write a grunge record. So I formed Circle of Silence with Greg Chase on from Badlands.
That's right.
And we go heavy. Well, my fans know that's not really me. Warrant did the same thing. So it was a futile attempt to stay relevant.
Right.
So I split. I retired.
Right.
I've had enough. I mean,
yeah. So what did you? Because if I understand right, didn't you move back to Montana and you were done with it?
Well, I floundered. You know, I'm a construction guy too, so I said I got to get a real life. I got married and moved to Tennessee.
Okay.
And had a baby, and my wife was an LA girl, and I bought this place as far away from anybody I could find. Started farming and raising hunting dogs, which is my passion. I love bird dogs. So
sure.
I just went from Hollywood Dave to Redneck Dave overnight, and I said, I don't want to hear LA. I don't want to think about it. And for 9 years, I disappeared. And then during that time, being a dog trainer, I had migrated north to Montana, because that's the mecca of bird hunting, like North Dakota.
Yep.
It's like Africa, you know. I mean, if you're working young dogs, that's where you go.
Yeah.
And I met a lot of guys that were going and telling me these crazy stories, and I didn't believe a word of it. Well, one day I packed a bunch of dogs in the truck and I drove up there, and you could sign up. It's called I forgot it. You can sign up on a ranch, and the rancher gets paid $10 a person to hunt on their land.
Sure.
And, it's called the Block Management Program, and they told me where to go. I walk into the closet, sign my name in, go out, and in 5 minutes, I literally had a limb in the birds and probably saw some of the biggest bucks I'd ever seen in my life. I said, "Oh my God." You know, and while I'm going up to this ranch to hunt, I meet the owner of this ranch, and he's on his own with a bunch of kids that are too young to work. And I told him, I said, "Your house needs paint and some repair. I'll do it for you for letting me hunt in your land." He goes, "You guys all say that and then you go home." I said, "No, here's what I need. Go buy it. I'll stick around." And while I was doing that, he said, "I could use a hand like you. You got any horse sense or cow sense?" "A little bit. I'm from Oklahoma, but I wouldn't say I'm a cowboy. Can't ride a horse worth of shit. Still can't." So he hired me. And that was the beginning of my new life. I was 9 years living in the middle of nowhere, working a cattle ranch, learning from the bottom up
Right.
what it's like to be a cowboy and ranching and the whole industry. And I was as green as they got. I'm still green. I mean, it takes a lifetime of dedication, but I could carry a rifle in my front seat, a couple of dogs in my truck, and after my shift, I was in the field. So I was pretty happy there. But honestly, you know, you're driving down the road and you hear the radio, you start singing along, and you start thinking about, God, the good old days. You know, there were some good times. I really missed it.
Yeah.
I deep down was kind of living in another person's body, if that makes any sense.
Yep.
Here's Rockstar Dave, then now here's Cowboy Dave with bird dogs and running field trials and a whole new network of people. And I always kind of felt like I didn't accept like the outsider,
Right.
you know?
Did people, like, were you recognized, or, you know, was it like, holy shit, we got the lead singer of Accept here in
Never said a word about it because they don't get it.
Right.
They listen to George Jones. I didn't talk about it. And one day, my boss's wife went on, we had dial up in those days.
Yep.
And she went on and put my name in there, probably to see if I was a convicted felon or something.
Right.
And my name popped up on Wikipedia. And I remember walking into the main ranch house, and there's photos printed out of me of big shows, and they're all standing there going, "What in the fuck? Why didn't you tell us this?" And as soon as they realized that I had done that, they changed.
Oh,
They treated me differently. I wasn't the good old boy, you know, starting the John Deere up in the morning to go feed cows. I was, all of a sudden, they kind of assumed that I was arrogant or something.
okay.
The whole atmosphere changed, and I didn't want to talk about it. It's like, yeah, that was part of my life. "Oh my God, you were on tour in Europe. You lived in. What are you talking about?" I'm like, I kind of blew it off.
Yeah.
Because I felt uncomfortable, you know, talking about it.
Sure. Wow. So did you end up, I mean, because if I understand right, in that 9 year period, at some point somebody says, "Hey, there's this thing MySpace," and you like, okay, throw your name up on MySpace, and that's kind of the beginning of you getting back into music.
I didn't even know what a computer was, how to turn it on, nothing. I had a guy out of Canada that was buying dogs from me. He was an IT specialist. He came into my house one day, which is an old farmhouse that was mine as the lead hand on this ranch. I said, "Where's your computer? I said, "I don't have one." He goes, "What?" He goes, man. He goes, "Here, let me hook you up. I'll trade you that puppy for a system and I'll come down and wire you up." Well, we had dial up for probably 2 years later than you guys did because we were so remote.
Right.
And he set me up on a MySpace page. And I mean, that day, I remember the screen would grow. Remember when you turned it on? Your page would take 5 minutes.
Yep.
And that day, I had 3 band offers to go to England or Europe to join bands. Where have you been? We thought you were dead.
Right.
And I'm like, wow, this is cool. I found internet porn. I found everything.
Yeah, was it
And
that was pretty awesome during the dial-up days, wasn't it?
yeah, it was great. Especially when you live alone and the nearest neighbor's 5 miles away, and you can walk out your front porch and pee off the deck. You know,
Right.
I mean, that was where I lived. So
Yep.
I'd shoot bucks off my back porch drinking beer. That's what I did. So,
Right.
I mean, I got all these offers, and then this Swedish guy reached out to me from Gypsy Rose, Martin Kronlund, and said, "I'll fly you over to Sweden. I want you to sing on my album." So, okay, then I opened a box of worms by going back to the ranch boss and saying, "Hey, I got to go to Sweden." He's like, "What?" I go, "Yeah, I'm going to go do an album." And he's like, "Oh no, I got 400 cows that are about to calve, and I got 20 head of horses. What are you talking about?" I said, "I'll just be gone 3 weeks. Take care of my dogs. I'll be right back." So I do the album, and at the end of the album, I started getting my voice back because I hadn't been singing.
Sure.
So I fly back to Montana, get a phone call or another email or whatever. "Dave, your voice really started coming back at the end. You got to come back and re-sing the album." So I go back to Kenny and say, "I got to go back to Sweden for 3 weeks." And that was kind of the end of our ranch partnership, because I had 30 something dogs and my own cows. And it was a lot of work. You can't just leave a guy in the dark.
Right.
So that began my journey back in music. And that was about 2004,
Okay.
something like that, 5.
Sure. So where did you end up moving? Like, okay, you got these opportunities. You'd been living in Montana. What was the next move and the next project?
Well, everybody promises you tours when you do a record. I had no idea about illegal downloading and how the music business had changed.
Yep.
Yeah, we're going to tour Europe. We're going to do this. Okay, cool. I wasn't working for the ranch. I stayed in that house for another 2 or 3 years, doing the same thing basically on my place, and never got any shows going with that. And it's like, here we go again. Nothing's happening, and multiple projects started getting thrown at me. So I said, "What the crap? I'll just go sing in those." I used some Montana studios, and I was doing records for other people and still working, doing construction, going on other ranches, being a hand when they needed it and stuff.
Yep.
Um, I had met an old girlfriend from the Accept days on the internet, and she came to visit me, and we kind of fell back into each other. And I flew back and left everything in Montana and moved to Germany. But I think it was about 2006 or something,
Okay.
7. And then the wheels started rolling. I met Andy Susamil in a pub one night on a Halloween party. He walked up behind me. He said, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "Nothing. Want to make a record?" That's where Universal Language came from. We
Okay.
recorded that together. That's where the party started.
And since then, I mean, you've kind of been the go-to guy for a lot of different projects. Bangalore Choir put out another album in 2010. You were part of, well, you talked about Gypsy Rose. There's been a bunch of solo albums. And I mean, you've been really prolific, much more so than most people that are associated with your genre.
Yeah, and to my detriment in the sense, because you can get a reputation for doing too many records.
Sure.
Oh, well, he was just on that album. I kind of overdid it, so I decided I'm not doing that anymore. And then I left Germany, went back to Billings, Montana, worked on a painting crew, and I got an email from Hans Ziller from Bonfire
Yeah.
out of the blue. And I'm like, "Oh God, here we go again." And he said, "Hey, I want to do this Easy Living record, and would you sing on it?" I said, "Okay, this is what I want. How much?" I did the album in Billings, and then he kept writing me saying, "Hey, I think he said, I have 10 shows confirmed. I'll fly you over." And I'm like, "Man, don't blow smoke. I've heard this before." Well, guess what? Plane ticket comes. I'm on a plane back to Germany, and I'm playing 10 days. Hans, in the interim, he's breaking up with Bonfire, and he decides he wants to buy the name and make a new Bonfire.
Yep.
So I did, I don't know, 4 records with them, a ton of touring with Bonfire. We played a lot. I think the first year, 180 shows.
Wow.
And then that just kind of went up in smoke. I mean, it was a totally unorganized group, bad management.
Sure.
I quit. So here I am.
After Bonfire, you just released in 2024, Baptized by Fire, which was a lot. I mean, for people who liked On Target, that was a lot heavier album. Like what led you to that format? Was it just wanting to try something new, or was that just where you were at?
I don't know if it was. I know my family and my wife here and my stepson's a big Soundgarden audio slave, Limp Bizkit fans, and I had met a bunch of guys in my village. Now, keep in mind, I was recording with Mario Percadani, which is 30 miles from here, and I had just recorded the Cacophony of Souls, my solo album.
Yep.
And I had about 40 shows confirmed, and that was March 13th. Well, we all know what happened in 2020.
Yep.
So I quit reading emails. The album comes out literally the week, and in that village where his studio is where the first case of COVID was reported.
Okay.
And they closed down everything. So it was like another stroke of the black cloud. So when they started giving us freedom to actually leave our front yard, I had met some guys here in the neighborhood, these young guys who kind of are from the 90s. And I was kind of getting bored with the White Snake style rock,
Right.
to be honest. And I walk into this thing, and there's 2 brothers and a bass player in the studio in the rehearsal room. It's 5 minutes from my house. I'm doing demos for other people, and we start writing songs, and it clicked. I did a Bangalore Choir album with them called Center Mass like 3 years ago that nobody knew about. It didn't do any promotion on it, just kind of flopped. But I realized that these guys were really talented, really hungry, and we've done a lot of touring together.
Yep.
So that album kind of evolved out of that influence from them and from me thinking, I want to test the waters here. The record did #1 in Germany for a few weeks. Then it was number 14. It actually did really well. But like you said, it wasn't the Dave that people are accustomed to.
Right.
So in my set, I'm playing half On Target, 3 or 4 Eat the Heat, and a couple of new songs from David Reece solo. And changes by Ozzy, Black Sabbath, and Ain't No Love in the Heart of the City. And we're killing it.
Yep.
So I realized that music is what people know me of. And we played a headline show in Hamburg. Bangalore Choir sold out on a Friday night. The next night was Pretty Maids, all these other big bands, the Corleone guys and all that stuff. I sold out Friday as a headline. And I went Bangalore Choir, everybody's singing. We recorded live that night. I think we put it on that re-release thing. There was like 5 or 6 live recordings of that night. Yep. We had Saxon Soundman record the whole set. He's phenomenal, Jackie LeMan. So all this is going on. I'm touring around Europe. And funnily enough, I'd never played France in all my journeys, ever. I've seen it across the road. I've been in Germany, and they go, that's France. I'm like, let's go play there. Nah, I want to play France. I'm like, why?
Right.
Let's go to Paris. Well, my manager's French, so he books us in a bunch of French clubs, and we pack them going back. But while I'm doing this, I'm thinking this Bangalore Choir thing the whole time. People are bringing me On Target. They're bringing me Cadence. They're bringing me Eat the Eat. And I'm going, So I called my manager one day. I said, you know what? It's all about branding, Valentin. And he just goes, God, I'm so happy you said that. Now the booking agents are calling, you know. They go, we love Dave, but we need more punters in the crowd.
Yep.
So it's a branding issue. Plus, you know what? Bangalore Choir was my baby.
Yeah.
And that's how the story is gone so far.
I would imagine that there's got to be a lot of opportunities to do the Monsters of Rock cruises. And
Mm-hmm.
are there any talks of what are the future plans? I know we talked about recording the new album. I mean, what are the future show plans? Is there any way to get you over to America, or what's the plan?
I went over last year in March on the release date of Baptized, and I played Minnesota and Wisconsin. Did pretty well.
Sure.
And my manager's now hooked up with a lot of the acts that you know that are doing the cruises.
Yep.
That's on the list to do. Of course, the end of this year, I'm going out with Alcatraz and Girls School on a 3-band bill, and then next year I'm on all the festivals, most of them, the big ones. Last year I did Grass Pop with Herman Frank from Accept. We played 40,000 people. It was insane. Czech Metal Fest. Man, I mean, I played all the big ones. I mean, I love it. I mean, it's like 45 minutes. It's like it never happened. You walk off stage and like, what just happened? You know, and you're on an airplane, you're flying back to Milan. It's like, I just played in front of 40,000 people today. I'm still sweating, you know? It's weird, but that's the plan. Yeah, I want to get over to the United States and tour. I've got agencies working with my agency here. And it's an American singer, right? So why not?
Yeah.
And then probably what I'll do is use American players because financially and logistically, especially with all these visa issues going on right now.
Yeah.
I mean, going to England for a European band, the visa costs are insane. And then for them to come here, the English band, it's insane. So that's murdered the market. Yeah, I'm coming. And I'm hoping to have the album out in September. So then it kicks off the whole touring. You know, you got to put it all in kind of a box. So the media comes out in August. People know the album's coming out in September, plan the steps. And then the shows are in the magazine and people are aware. And then you go through the Christmas holidays. And then from about the 15th of December to January 15th, nothing happens over here. Nothing.
Yeah.
Then about the third week of January, things get really nuts. Confirming dates. And in the interim, I want to come over to the States and play too.
Right.
You know.
I knew you played Minnesota, and I remember thinking I need to get to that show, and I don't know for what, I can't remember where it was at in Minnesota, but I wanted to hit that show because I'm in Fargo. Anyway, I think
It was in Fridley. It was at a
Fridley.
place called Southern, and it was packed.
Yeah.
It was absolutely a zoo.
Yeah.
And then we played a casino show in Turtle Lake, Wisconsin, which was okay. Well, I'm not going to say it was packed, but casinos have a budget, right? It's entertainment. They don't care if Mickey Mouse is there with the Disney crew. It's just a live band. You know? Right. They pay really well, but treat you really well.
Right.
Owned by the native people of the area, and you know, it was cool. But I got to see the old gang and play the songs, and oh God, we're getting old. You know what I mean? I see all my friends from 1980s. I'm like, dude, I don't recognize you. They're like, it's me.
Did you see any of those guys from Dare Force? Would you even keep in touch with any of those guys?
Yeah, I spent time with the bass player, the guitar player. Sure. All the crew guys were there. I mean, we're all getting older. Some of them have died. Yeah. Some of them have been injured. Some of them are disabled. Yeah, we're not young kids. I'll be 65 in August this year.
So how much?
I'm not.
I was just gonna say, how much longer do you feel like? Hey, I mean, you just said you're 65. How much longer can David Reece rock?
Until the time comes where I'm not singing like I am now. I'm not going to go out there and fake it like a lot of these guys for the money.
Yep.
I refuse to use fake tracks. I don't. I'll know when it's. I mean, because I've gone through physical changes. I mean, the voice is a muscle. It's a collagen instrument that scream your head off for 30 years and see how you feel. It's like a drill sergeant. Every one of them talks like that, because they're yelling all.
Yep.
But vocally, I'm trained. I don't drink. I don't take drugs. I've been sober for 7 years. I given myself kind of a Reece fresh button, and I'm still singing pretty well. But I'll be honest with myself, because I went to see Whitesnake and it was an abomination.
Yeah.
Here's David Coverdale holding the microphone out to the crowd and just standing there, and I'm like, I didn't pay $50 to see this. This is 80 guitar solos.
Yeah.
I'm a guy like, if Bruce Dickinson's still nailing it. Alfred's still doing it. But the older you get, you learn to work with what you got left.
Yep.
And when I don't have it left, the gas runs out of the tank, I'm walking.
Okay.
I'm not going to do that to myself.
I saw Kiss and David Lee Roth on the End of the Road, the retirement tour. And I mean, Dave was never known for his singing voice, but he could barely, and then he's just standing there, and then Kiss, Paul Stanley was just croaking, and like you said, it was sad to watch.
Yeah, but it's a weird thing with that. It's kind of like the European thing. It's the nostalgia thing. Yep. You grow up with that, but to see your hero, the blonde lion, David Lee Roth, doing these double eagles on stage, and I did a show with Steel Panther, that grass pop thing, and I remember seeing Ralph doing the splits backstage and taking his legs and pulling them up behind his head, stretching, and I went, wow, that's what Roth used to do. And Eddie he's gone, sadly. Yep. That whole thing is not, even when Roth was on his own, he was still the baddest motherfucker on the planet. He couldn't sing a note, but he was cool to watch. Yep. But look at Mick Jagger. You got a guy in his 80s who's, he's getting better every year. But if you notice Paul McCartney's starting to sound a little rough. I mean, he's not, but he's got so many hit songs. He just hits a few chords and the crowd's singing with him, and he's just kind of humming along. There's going to come a time for all of us. I mean, and you're going to see more and more and more of it. I mean, a lot of the guys that I looked up to are in their late 70s, early 80s. They can't fly around all day and do 90 minutes and then get up at 5 and then drive 12 hours. I mean, it's nuts.
Yeah.
And then you got the flu. You're trapped you used to go on the tour bus. Now it's gotten with the financial situation. Everybody's traveling in a Sprinter van. Yeah. So you're crowded in there with your gear with a trailer behind you, and somebody's got a cold. Well, guess what? The singer is the first one to get nailed.
Sure.
And everybody wants to stay up and pumped up with adrenaline after the gig, and I want to sleep, and they're tearing walls down, and you get to a point where you're like, you know what?
Speaking of staying up and getting crazy after the gig, you mentioned getting sober, and you talked earlier about you like to drink. You did a little bit of the nose candy. Was there a thing, or was it just sick and tired of being sick and tired? What led to you getting sober?
All of it. I mean, I finally realized what love is. I'm married now for 11 years.
Okay.
My drinking had gone from, afternoons before the show to during the show to after the show to come down after the show in my room. Then it developed into the chronic waking up and eating breakfast and then, it's about time for a beer. And I've developed I was starting to get where I think they call it wet brain, where 2 beers I'd be completely hammered. Hammered. My wife would go, how much have you taken drank today? And I'm like, 2. She was wasted. And I was starting to, I don't know. It was just, I always knew that I had a drinking problem. I always knew. And the weird thing about alcohol for me was I hated alcohol before I joined Accept. I had a beer, I'd vomit.
Yeah.
I was not a drinker. I mean, I'd stuff my nose full of blow all day long, but I didn't like alcohol. But working with Dieter, here's the Chivas, here's the beer. That's a German tradition. Let's get to work. And after a couple of months of that, you're just kind of like a motorized, habit. And then it developed into this monster where I couldn't function unless I had been drinking. I gained a lot of weight. I wasn't singing as good as I thought I was. I'd listen to recordings live and go, "Oh God, ooh, 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 ah." And I would think by drinking that I would be better. I got to that. Well, I need a few drinks to loosen up.
Yep.
And just, I'll give you the end of the story. I was in Denmark, and a friend of mine from Austria and I had gone up there, and we were invited to a blues show, a really popular band in Copenhagen. So we went to see them. Before we went to the gig, I think we drank an 18 pack each, and we were hammered. Got on the subway, get to the bar, and we run into these Swedish guys that are drinking the 8%ers, the 10% beers, right? And they're giant Vikings, and they're just pounding. So I remember drinking all that with them and going into the venue, and I was seeing double. And I'm doing this, and then they called me on stage to sing a song. And apparently I ripped it up. I don't really remember it, but I remember saying to myself for months prior to that, please just let me not drink tomorrow.
Yeah.
And I walked out of the venue. My friend is going, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm going to the apartment. I'm going home." And I woke up the next day so sick from the alcohol that I said, "That's it." And we had to fly that day back to Italy. And he is hungover like hell. You know that feeling where you just want to die.
Yeah.
And he goes right to the airport bar, and after 3 beers, he's Mr. Happy again. And I'm just sitting in the bar going, "Don't drink, don't drink, don't drink." And that was a Saturday. The next day, Sunday, I was home. I had 2 beers. And I said, "What am I doing?" And that was the 4th. The next day was the 4th of September. And that will be 7 years this year that I stopped.
Congrats.
I mean, it's not a bragging thing. If anybody's suffering from addiction, they know what I mean. It's a mind fuck. I mean, you have a problem. And I don't know if you're afraid to be yourself without it. Bless you. If you're afraid to be yourself without it, it's like cigarette smokers, if they don't have their cigarettes, they're not themselves. And then health reasons, I mean, thank God I didn't get cancer of the liver or all that stuff, because I had a bunch of tests done after that. And they said, "Oh, your liver's like a 20-year-old guy." Huh? I mean, I drank. So I'm lucky. And I knew if I wanted to have staying power locally, I'd have to quit this shit.
Yeah.
And it was awakening, And if anybody's out there suffering with it, you can stop. You can do it. I mean, that's my advice. If you really need to quit, trust me, your life gets better the first day. I lost 15 pounds probably in a month.
Yeah.
I was bloated like a frog.
Yeah.
I had to wear bigger clothes and hide my belly and all that stuff, and everybody could tell. And then after a month, people saw me. They didn't recognize me. They're like, "Dude, you sick or something? You lost a lot of weight." I go, "No, I just quit drinking."
I've been sober for close to 21 years, but I looked like this. My neck out to here. I was dropped out of college, and it was actually Iraq was the thing. Getting home from Iraq in 2004, I was like, you know what? If I had died over there, I never accomplished anything so I got sober when I got home from Iraq. And anyway, you're exactly right. Like everything in my life took off. I went back to college and did all the stuff that I wanted to do that I couldn't do when I was drinking. Anyway.
It's a weird thing, isn't it? It's like Rob Halford. I think he just celebrated 38 years or something.
Right.
I mean, I saw Rob when he was drinking. He's a different human being.
Yeah.
He's still singing. And that saved his voice. I mean, he was drinking a bottle of vodka a day, and my thing wasn't like hard liquor. Mine was beer.
Right.
I love beer, and I still do. The taste of beer, I love it. But I could drink all day and every day, and that was my thing, and it got me.
Yeah.
Like you. I mean, you look at yourself in those photos, and you don't really have a neck. You got jowls down to your shoulder.
Yeah.
You got tits, and you're like, "What am I doing, man?"
Yeah.
And then you're thinking, "Oh, I just got to work out for 2 weeks before the tour." But while you're on Stairmaster, you're pounding Heinekens. Like, this makes a lot of sense.
Right. You mentioned that you had moved out of the house, I think, when you were 15. You said you lived with a bunch of guys, maybe some family problems. Did you ever work things out with your parents? Or what? If
Yeah, it was
I
it
can
was
ask.
mostly my father and I. My father was from the school of he was a PhD. I think he had five or six. He put himself through college, worked a full time job during the day. My first 12 years of my life, and he was not a loving person. He was adopted. He had a lot of psychological issues. He had I think a 160 IQ. Um, Retired at 50, wealthy, because nobody could work with him. He was an asshole. So I just couldn't live there. And by the grace of God, I can say my mother and I are tight. She's getting up on in years. I saw her when I was in the States back last spring. I went down to Texas and hung out with her and my brother. My brother is suffering a lot of physical issues from the military.
Okay.
Bones and injuries and things like that.
Okay.
Jumping out of airplanes and fighting the enemy. He's a year and a half younger than me, but he's torn to pieces. Thank God the Audie Murphy organization is helping him with stem cell work. So I work with. There's a woman named Catherine Nadal she works with Wounded Warriors. She's a 30-year colonel medic.
Sure.
Did a lot of time in the desert, and she has a cool podcast. So shout out to Catherine Nadal. Yeah, things I can't complain. My relationship with my kids is much better since I stopped drinking. My wife and I are happily married. That it's all plus. I mean, music is number one for me, and then my wife, to be honest. But without them, I don't know if I'd be sitting here talking to you. I mean, when it came down to you either put that down or you're gone, wait a minute, is this $2 bottle of beer worth throwing this out the window? This is a good thing.
Right.
But my mom and I are good. My mom is sober too. She's been sober my dad since 2006. I think she's been sober 15 years.
Yeah.
My mom went off the deep end when he died, and she's sober. So it runs in our family.
Yeah.
But yeah, life's good. I mean,
How did you end up in Italy?
Well, that's by the grace of the social media, I knew a guy named Valerio that knew me, and I played Firefest with Bangalore, three original members. Yeah. And my future wife was in the crowd, was his best friend, and she was going through a divorce, and one thing led to another, and I invited her on some of those Bonfire shows because I got to test a new car. You know what I mean? You put a woman in a van with a bunch of stinky, irritable, arrogant maniacs and start driving from city to city. That's a pretty good test of what kind of person they are.
Sure.
And the first show we did, I remember I walked off stage. She was on the back line rolling cases down the ramp, loading a truck with the guys. I go, "What are you doing?" She goes, "I'm helping." I said, And she was very quiet. She enjoyed it. She got to see Germany in some places, and then I invited her again for another test run. And I knew that was 2014, summer. Yep. I moved in here in December 2014, so it's going well.
Awesome. Is there any talk of and I know there was a reissue of on Bangalore Choir's On Target, but with vinyl being the big thing now, is there any chance of putting out something like that on vinyl, or is there anything going on with that album specifically?
If I sign with the labels that are calling me right now, I've already brought that up. We should do a reissue.
Yes.
And especially this new album, because Digipacks and vinyl, most of my fan base, that's what they want.
Yes.
Sadly, a lot of the record companies are going to streaming now.
Yeah.
It's turned into test market of 2 singles. And then if it works, they'll say, okay, release physical.
Sure.
But yes, absolutely. Drop the needle. That's my favorite thing to do. I mean, I love
Yes.
vinyl, and the artwork is you can at least you can see it. And you
Yeah.
can read the print.
Uh,
But
were there any unreleased tracks or anything that could be thrown on, or?
yeah, but I got some of those weirdos that I wrote the songs with. They're like hoarding things. I found a bunch of it. I did a record called The Lost Demos, Bangalore. Have you seen it?
I think I did hear about that. Yes, 'cause
Yeah,
I was just looking on
you'll
eBay.
find 8-track. It's a double CD thing. You got the regular songs that are on target, but then you'll find a lot of stuff. What is it called? The Lost Demos? I can't remember. But
Okay.
my manager, pre-manager kind of friend guy, Giles Lavery, said, let's do that. And I had a guy who had we fired him from the band during the mixing process, the drummer.
Okay.
And the night person at the studio knew him. So after we had finished all the demos, he somehow convinced the guy that he had to go into the safe, and he stole all the master tapes.
Holy shit.
So, yeah, so I got an email saying for $30,000 you can have your songs back. So I know the number to the FBI, and I think you should just send them right now. You can't. You're not going to extort me. So I got all that stuff, and I put a lot of that on that double album.
Yeah.
I found it. So it's pretty cool listening. A lot of people have bought it from me on shows that I've done. I don't have any more here, but
Sure.
people are like, "What's this?" And then they look at all these titles and they go, "That's stuff that was supposed to be on the album that I fought for that never made it."
Sure.
Which I think are better songs, but corporate
Sure.
America, that's the single. That should be a single. Blah blah blah. And you go, "Okay, Mister Suit and Tie." It's kind of like in brass, right? When they got the stars on their shoulder, you go, "Okay, if that's what you think."
Sure.
You know?
And has there ever been any talk of re-releasing Eat the Heat? And would they even contact you if they were going to? I don't know how that would work.
Actually, Giles mentioned that to me a few weeks ago. He goes, "You need to re-record Eat the Heat." And by
Okay.
law, legally, I can do it because I wrote the record with the band. I could do whatever I want. I mean, as long as they're credited as songwriters, I could do it. And he's been pushing me for that for God 2 years. But last 2 weeks ago, he really got on me about it. So
Okay.
I've thought about it. It's weird because they re-released Eat the Heat on orange vinyl.
Yeah.
A couple years ago.
Yeah.
And when I'm playing gigs, it's so funny because people will come up to me at the merch booth, right? And they'll have an unopened copy from like '89.
Right.
And then they'll have the re-release. They did like 2,000 of them, gold or orange vinyl. And they'll say, "I have to apologize to you. I hated your guts. I never opened this record, but I bought this one and I absolutely love you. Please forgive me." And I look at it, it's the weirdest thing. It's like, well, 36 years later and they like the record. I mean, at least they said something. It's kind of like Bangalore, I get that too, like my history has been, a record comes out and people go, eh. And then, years later, they'll come to me and say, "This is the greatest thing you've ever done." And you look at them like, seriously? We laughed about that the other day, but I've thought about it.
Yeah.
I play a lot of that stuff live. I can still do Ecstasy. I can still do D Train and Hellhammer. A lot of people I did Mistreated once on stage at a festival. We had keyboard players and all that orchestrated stuff. The place went cuckoo outside, and I thought, but it's hard to sing, man. I'm not gonna lie. That's when I could really shout.
Sure. Sure. So, and I think I asked this, but when is there a time frame for the new Bangalore Choir album? Is there a title, and what can you tell us about that project, and when we can expect it?
I'm hoping September
Okay.
release. So my ass is against the wall right now. I'm half done. The songs are written, but I've got half of them recorded.
Right.
I want it to be reminiscent of the Untarget album cover.
Yep.
So I'm going to use, what was her name? Betty, whatever, the World War II girls that were doing all the aircraft building. I gave an artist today, actually, my vision in my head. Title wise, it's got to have something to do with the target.
Sure.
I have a bunch of ideas written down that I probably shouldn't tell you, but I do have ideas for album titles because I don't know which one it's going to be.
Sure.
But one that did come to mind that I will release is Rapid Fire Succession.
Okay. Awesome.
You like that?
Yeah.
You like that?
That sounds badass.
Yeah, I mean, what does it mean, right? I mean, it's pretty obvious what rapid fire succession means. I mean, I was looking at it today, and it's like, you know, speed, continuity, fast-paced sequence, series of actions or statements in a short amount of time. So,
Sounds very
that's
military.
one of them. Yeah, I mean, and On Target was kind of military with the stupid bomb that was made out of paper mache and that naked chick on the cover. But yeah, well, the one I did release a couple of years ago in July was called Center Mass.
Yes.
I'd gone to all these photos of cadavers that were opened up, and I'd had the scope on the heart and the lungs, and I gave it to the label, and they're like, nah.
Right.
That's a little too. That's like those really dark black metal bands. It looks like a pile of sticks, and that's their logo. You know, it's like hey, I'm going to start a fire. Oh, look, that's a logo of a band. What does it say? I don't know.
Man, I'm so glad to see that you are in a good spot. Talked about your sobriety.
Thanks, Anthony.
Bangalore Choir is coming back. You've got that brand back, and there's a lot of good things happening. And I was such a fan of Eat the Heat, On Target, and I followed a lot.
I see that behind your chair there. It's rather impressive. I like that.
I think that On Target actually is from a Kerrang. From Kerrang. So I'm a massive fan, and I'll be and when the new album comes out, you are absolutely invited on if you want to talk about it, or I will do an opening of it and a review, and we could definitely promote it on the channel. That would be just an honor.
No problem, and I'll get you a copy from my management. I've got the list of all the guys that are cool with me on the podcast that actually ask me questions that matter and really want to know how it worked and where it went and where it's going. So I've got you in my list, and I'll just have them mail you a copy, and then we can you can listen to it, delve it, talk about the tracks, and we can, they always want to talk about the trophy, right? Most of the podcasts I do, they don't want to talk about the practice field or the firing range. You know, you would me about the firing range, right? They don't want to talk to me about, I won the match. Here's the record. I mean, I enjoy conversation that way.
Yes.
Because, a lot of times I do interviews, and that's their style, fine, but it's always a trophy. They don't want to talk about the working process and what were you thinking about this and what's this mean. It's all subjective anyways. It's just a bunch of words with music. But if somebody says, well, I thought it meant this, then I go, bingo. It worked.
Right.
Living on a Prayer, songs like that. Of course, you know what he's talking about. But if somebody goes, what the hell is he doing? What's he talking about? That's a cool chorus, but does it mean this or does it mean that? So that's the shooting range. You know what I'm saying? That to me, I'm sighting in and I'm trying to find something that makes sense, and I'm not just standing there with the trophy, with all the other guys going, I took third place,
Yeah. Well, it's been awesome hearing the story, and I appreciate you going into such detail about the history.
Thank you.
I'm super excited to get this out. Thank you so much.
All right, my brother.
Hey,
Thank you. God bless you, man.
Stay in touch, and I look forward to talking to you again. And man, I'm just rooting for you.
Fingers crossed. This week we get a deal in the rollings. All the large labels that are still alive are all talking to me, and the managers are all doing their shtick, and I should have an answer sometime this week, early next week. And then, I'll have all this pile of songs probably finished recording. And then once the deal's dried on ink and I go into production, then I can give, maybe a teaser of, 3 or 4 songs to you, and then blah, blah, blah.
That would be fantastic. All right, David. Hey, thanks a lot, man. I really appreciate it.
See you later, soldier. Nice to see you.
Take care.
Bye, Anthony.